no sense.
You saw Buffalo Bill doing that.
You ever do anything like this?
Howdy folks, and welcome once again to the Spaghetti Theater for the Spaghetti Theater Review. This time I'm going to review another Western. Normally it would be a spaghetti Western, but this time I'm going to jump back to the US so that I can give this lost gem the review that it deserves. This is Crispin number 2.
Armed and ready for action.
Anyway, the movie's called FIRECREEK and it stars 2 acting legends, Jimmy Stewart and the great Henry Fonda. They were buddies in real life and appeared in the same movie more than once. Only this one is their best, in my opinion of course. Maybe you're more of a fan of the Cheyenne Social Club. Here, Jimmy Stewart plays the hero again, the recently appointed by default sheriff of this town of rejects.
You could maybe arrest those men and put them in jail. Arrest them for what?
The town of FIRECREEK.
Fire Creek's out.
The name of the movie. And then there's Henry Fonda, playing the bad guy and leader of this gang of classic character actor thugs. And I mean it, I can name every one of these guys by name, without even looking them up. First there's Crazy Eyes Jack Elam, or Elam, I know this is the right way to say it in the wrong way. I have messed it up numerous times. Sorry, the soul of Jack, whatever your pronunciation last name is. Elam? Elama. And then there's James Best, at his James worst, because he's playing a rapist here. Followed by Gary Lockwood, who's no better. He's best known for 2001: A Space Odyssey, and for playing the character of Gary Mitchell on the original Star Trek. But mostly, of course, the magic sword. And finally there's Morgan Woodward, who I believe holds the record for the most guest appearances on Gunsmoke, right next to Victor French of course. And always as a different character of course too. But yeah, they're all being led by the great Henry Fonda.
Today I'm one of a few. I lead. That's important to me.
Who normally never plays the villain, was breaking a lot of new ground in 1968 since this was the same year that he played the bad guy in Once Upon a Time in the West. A far more evil bad guy too. Shoots kids right in the face. Pow! However, I do enjoy the message that I got out of this movie in the end though, once it's all said and done.
Was the day a man decides not to face the world is the day he better step out of it.
It's why I remember it so well, and the reason I decided to review it. So here it is folks, from Vincent Micavetti, the director of Ask Max. Something else I reviewed on my channel. A very different tone of movie than this. It's Jimmy Stewart and Henry Fonda towards the end of their acting careers. In 1968's FIRECREEK. Sorry there. In 1968's FIRECREEK. So it all starts off with Henry Fonda and his band of scumbags, on the run from whatever illegal shit they were doing, since Henry Fonda is shot and in need of a doctor. So he sends Jack Elam and Gary Lockwood ahead to scope things out. So cut to Jimmy Stewart's farmhouse, where he lives with his 2 sons here, and his much younger wife, played by classic TV character actress Jacqueline Scott, who always seems to play the main character's wife or sister. She was the sister of Richard Kimball, then was the wife of Dennis Weaver in the movie Duel. She really gets around this little redhead. Anyway, to add to her problems, she's pregnant again. This time with a daughter. And I don't mean soon, I mean right now, as she quietly and casually informs her husband, Jimmy Stewart.
It's time.
It's time, Jen.
It's time, alright, and she's just laughing and requesting that Jimmy Stewart go get this crotchety old hen named Dulcie to come on over here and help her with the, birthing, since the nearest doctor in the county has still yet to arrive. FIRECREEK is still an up-and-coming town, remember, which is why Jimmy Stewart has to leave right now anyway. even though his wife's about to go into labor. And he's on the verge of having a Dick Van Dyke episode of the Old West.
Well, listen, I'll go into town, I'll get a good riding horse and go to Sweetwater.
Since he's supposed to meet the county preacher in town.
The Reverend Broyles makes a long trip. We should have a fair attendance for him.
For the weekly sermon, since he's also the sheriff. By default, like I said, because no one else wants the job. Yeah, things are a real clusterfuck in the town of FIRECREEK. Very disorganized. And its residents are mostly old folks. And there's no real order yet, or law. So they're all looking to Jimmy Stewart to just step it up and take control. Only he's a bit of a puss right now too, who just wants to live his life and raise his family in peace. And is not really interested in being sheriff or stepping up and helping the people of FIRECREEK get their shit together. Only he's a nice guy and feels obligated. Pretty much the story of every Jimmy Stewart character's life. He's a lot like his Liberty Valance character here. And man, is his wife acting so nonchalant about having a baby in the Old West. Well, it is her third after all, and she's not worried or even showing signs of discomfort. So cut to Jack Elam and Gary Lockwood, who happened upon this young hot blonde of the Old West. Well, isn't she pretty? And about to be violated by Jack Elam.
I'm old enough to be your grandpa.
And probably Gary Lockwood too. I hate to see a thing like that. A pretty girl getting violated by two filthy assholes like this. It's like pulling a flower out of the ground and taking a shit on it. Right, Crispin number 2?
That's damn right.
Which is exactly what they try to do after they find out that there's a town called FIRECREEK up ahead. Only Henry Fonda shows up just in the nick of time to stop Gary Lockwood from violating this lady.
What's going on here?
Since, although the leader of this gang doesn't approve of rape, well, good for you, Henry Fonda.
You have a dress there to pay for.
He does make Gary Lockwood pay her for ruining her dress, though. Only she's turned on by Gary Lockwood now because she's never held money before.
I ain't never had no $5 before.
Cut it now, honey.
So cut to that crotchety old hen I was telling you about, Dulcie, who's also the mother of that blonde chick, as she runs home to take off that dirty dress and check herself out in the mirror until Dulcie busts in and ruins her fun.
I figured I'd be buying me a new dress without their money, Mama.
You got enough dresses. You get one on for church.
Stop ogling your own titties and get ready for church, girl. That's when Jimmy Stewart shows up and requests that Dulcie go to his place since his wife's ready to have that baby and could maybe use the hand of another woman.
And yet on labor?
I never asked her that.
Could be a matter of some interest to you.
So she bitchingly agrees and sends her daughter off with them into town for the middle of the week sermon. So cut to the streets of the up and coming, FIRECREEK. Yay! And here's the mayor, Tommy Kirk, everyone, as the Shaggy DA. Hey, they even have their own eat. So it was a chain, even back then. Maybe come up with a better name for your restaurant though, guys. The FIRECREEK Bar and Grill sounds awesome. So this is FIRECREEK. Small, a bit dumpy, but not as trashy as the streets from Django, right as Henry Fonda and his gang ride into town, and only plan to spend an hour.
We'll take an hour, no more.
Just long enough to rest and for Henry Fonda to get his wound tended to, even though we already know that the nearest doctor is still on his way to town. So Henry Fonda sits a spell and spots this local child just sitting in the middle of the street playing in a mud puddle. Parenting of the Old West. No video games yet, so puddles it is. He then spots this old timer who runs the general store, napping in his chair. Business is slow today, and probably every day. And finally this old blacksmith shop guy. Blacksmithing. What a town. Then this Indian lady comes out to check on Junior here. Since she's the mother, I guess, with a very white baby. They explain later, don't worry. And this is actress Barbara Luna. She played Captain Kirk's wife on the original Star Trek episode Mirror Mirror. And although not actually an Indian in real life, at least she's not a white chick, painted to look like an Indian. I mean, they might have painted her a little bit, but she was already brown. Anyway, she encourages Junior to play in the puddle and even wash up in it, as Jack Elam and Gary Lockwood start to enjoy her too. Ooh, another woman for them to possibly rape, they thinks. So James Best takes this opportunity to pick a fight with Gary Lockwood, which gets everyone's attention and even wakes up Old Man River here from his slumber. And this, everyone, is character actor Dean Jagger. He was in that Twilight Zone episode Static, where he could pick up radio stations from the past. And many other things, yes I know. The fight then gets really dark when Gary Lockwood shoves James Best's head into this water trough here and tries drowning him, as everyone just watches on and lets it happen. That's when this kid comes wandering out of the stable, right into this fiasco. This kid, who's pretty much Little Joe from Bonanza, only he was born slow, so Ben Cartwright abandoned him on the streets of FIRECREEK, cut his losses, and moved on. However, he is smart enough to realize they're drowning this guy, and lets Jimmy Stewart know as he rides right into this shit too.
Had him in there a long time, Johnny.
So Jimmy Stewart intervenes, only to be straight out ignored.
Hereabouts might not like somebody drowning in their livery trough.
James Best is their buddy, and considering how all this turns out in the end, it's probably James Best just to let them drown him. Only no, Sheriff Jimmy Stewart is a decent human being and stops Gary Lockwood from drowning James Best, which offends Gary Lockwood so he pulls a gun on him.
How'd you like to take his place?
How dare you not let me drown a person in the middle of town?
For everyone to witness. So, Dim Sum Little Joe informs these guys that Jimmy Stewart is the sheriff.
Maybe you don't realize you're talking to our town sheriff.
So they break it all off and continue with their lives. For now. Henry Fonda even takes the time to apologize to Sheriff Jimmy Stewart for this whole spectacle.
Sorry if my partner's fooling got to you.
And then asks him when the next stagecoach will be through.
Well, it's the overnight stop at the Sweetwater stage. It comes through every Saturday.
Sweetwater? Wasn't that the town from Once Upon a Time in the West? It all connects, folks. That's also where he finds out that that doctor should be here by nightfall. Hopefully.
Well, the doctor from Sweetwater's on his way here.
Thanks. Be out of here by then.
Only they'll be gone by then, Sheriff Jimmy Stewart. One can only hope. Because they kind of want to spend the night now, since there's no real law here in FIRECREEK. So Henry Fonda decides to sleep on it for a few hours over at this boarding house.
I'll get a couple of hours sleep and take a look at this.
And see how he feels about it then. So then cut to Jimmy Stewart and Slow Little Joe, where we find out that even this kid has dreams of having his own horse farm one day.
That'd take a heap of money to raise horses, wouldn't it, Johnny?
But lacks the motivation and brains to do it.
I'm not smart enough to raise horses.
So he does small jobs for Jimmy Stewart. All he really wants is to feel important and useful in some way.
I know Mr. Edelman says he don't know what he'd do without you helping him around there.
And it's right then that the preacher arrives in FIRECREEK to give that sermon to all the townsfolk. He's a traveling county preacher and is played by another notable character actor, Ed Begley Sr., the father of Ed Begley Jr. Yeah, they look nothing alike.
Really? That's his dad? You're right. He's like shorter, fatter. Ed Bailey Jr. is, well, taller, thinner.
I know, right? Totally different. Not like Bruce Glover and Crispin Glover where they kind of look alike. Anyway, he tells Jimmy Stewart that the sermon starts at 3, so make sure everyone's there.
Services will begin promptly at 3 o'clock.
Over at the general store, since FIRECREEK doesn't have a church yet. It's coming in on Tuesday. So cut to James Best as he teaches the baby about guns. They then take it upon themselves to ask this Indian lady straight out why the hell her baby's white.
You full-blooded? Kid ain't.
Only she doesn't tell it. All we get is that she is currently without husband.
Husband come along with a kid?
No.
So cut to Henry Fonda over at the boarding house now. Owned by this tough old geezer in a wheelchair, who Henry Fonda has a drink with before being shown to his room by the owner's robot granddaughter. This lady.
The room is ready, Mr. Larkin.
Inger Stevens, everyone. From the Twilight Zone. 2 episodes, actually. The Hitchhiker, and that one where she's their robot daughter. Inger Stevens, yeah, she died young, sadly, from an apparent suicide. She was also in the western Hang 'em High with Clint Eastwood and Ed Begley Sr. again. Anyway, in Henry Fonda's room now, she shows a lot of distaste towards him and his lifestyle choices. You know, being a criminal and all. Yet she does provide him with some first aids so he can self-doctor himself. So cut to church time,
Bringing in the sheaves.
where everyone in town tries to enjoy Father Ed Begley Sr.'s sermon.
Yea, even the fires of hell.
That is, until Henry Fonda's band of character actors crash the whole thing and make a scene.
There will be no drinking during services.
So Father Ed Begley lets him have it, and he uses his sermon to pretty much call Gary Lockwood a loser.
The fires of hell, the burning pit.
Which only offends Gary Lockwood,
Shut up.
the biggest dick of this group.
I have stirred thee, friend. It was my intention.
Sheriff Jimmy Stewart even tries to reason with him, only it's pointless.
All these people here have come to listen to the preacher, and anybody who doesn't like what he has to say can leave.
So, to avoid a problem, Jack Elam convinces them all to leave. For now.
We can get our supplies later.
As everyone turns to Jimmy Stewart for help, expecting him to deal with these dicks since, well, he is the sheriff. By default, he's still the sheriff.
I think you ought to tell those fellows to move on.
So cut back over to Henry Fonda at the boarding house, where Inger Stevens has even helped Henry Fonda out with his bandaging, and even opens up briefly by telling Henry Fonda that he reminds her of someone.
You reminded me of somebody.
Who?
Someone she once knew, who's probably dead now. It is Eel West.
That's not important.
Only she leaves seconds later, so we don't get much more on it. So church finally gets out, and Jimmy Stewart's kids spot Gary Lockwood doing gun tricks, and run over to check it out, as Jimmy Stewart goes to see Father Ed Begley Sr. off. Then, to be a dick and get some revenge, Gary Lockwood takes a quick shot at this bell. Pow! Right as Father Ed Begley Sr. is passing by it, spooking his horse and tossing him off hard to the ground. He did that shit on purpose, and then tries to pass it off as some kind of accident.
The young'uns got to talking some about trick shooting. I kind of got carried away.
Only we all know, you asshole.
I think you did that on purpose.
But to avoid conflict, the preacher doesn't let it escalate past this.
No harm done, Mr. Cobb.
Well, that's real generous of you, Mr. Preacher.
Low-life dirtbags. Even Henry Fonda agrees.
What am I supposed to do? Keep a rein on you 24 hours a day?
And now, they've decided to spend the night.
Couldn't be no better place for staying over.
So great. More of these guys' company. This guy didn't tell Sheriff Jimmy Stewart that he should just arrest those guys and throw them in jail.
You could maybe arrest those men and put them in jail.
Arrest them for what?
Only Sheriff Jimmy Stewart doesn't feel it's his place to do anything yet.
I'm a farmer with a family to take care of.
But when you do, make sure you let slow little Joe know because...
But don't you forget, I'm your deputy.
Yeah, he's the deputy. Of course he is. This is FIRECREEK, folks. AKA Pushoverville.
No harm done, Mr. Cobb.
I shot the sheriff, pow, but I didn't shoot the deputy, 'cause he accidentally shot himself. So cut to Jack Elam, who thinks that it's a crime that local hut Indian woman is wasting all her energy cleaning windows.
Girl wasting all that energy on them windows. Me over here in a fix.
And not banging his sexy ass. And it's just then that Sheriff Jimmy Stewart shows up at that Indian woman's house to shed a little more light on her white baby situation. Jimmy Stewart apparently has something to do with it, and they're keeping it a secret from everyone.
Sometimes silence is best.
So she wants to move to Sweetwater to avoid,
People will think that...
Maybe I don't care what they think.
more conflict between other people in their opinions. Only Sheriff Jimmy Stewart feels differently and wants her to stay right here.
Melly, I want you to stay in FIRECREEK.
And just come out with it already, regardless of what anyone thinks.
And I want us to say something and bring it out in the open like I wanted to do when you came here.
So cut to Dulcie, so we can verify her man-hating crotchiness again.
You'll be just about as helpful as that doctor who seems to be on the other side of the county.
Dulcie, you've no patience with the menfolk.
Well, they come in all sizes, Miss Sawyer, but I've yet to find one that's worth a woman's patience.
But to be somewhat fair to her, these are the men of the Old West. And the men of FIRECREEK. She probably doesn't meet a whole lot of good ones. So cut over to slow little Joe, who happens upon Old Man Jagger at the general store. And even though he's a bit slow, has a bad feeling about that gang of dipshits spending the night.
You think that something bad's gonna happen? It'll be night soon, and that's when things happen.
He's not wrong. That's wise advice coming from a guy like him.
You know, now that I think about it, he kind of looks like James Dean, too.
So cut over to that boarding house again, where Henry Fonda requests the company of Inger Stevens for a little small talk now.
If you're any good at small talk, it always manages to bore me to sleep.
Small talk that quickly turns into an argument, since again, she doesn't approve of Henry Fonda and his criminal lifestyle.
You're as dishonest as any common road bandit.
A lifestyle that he defends and even brags about.
Today I'm one of a few. I lead.
You're admitting your only importance is collecting men who don't care whether they live or die.
But in the end, Inger Stevens is right here. So to make a name for yourself, you get a band of low-life shitheads with no soul at all to follow you around and help you commit self-serving criminal acts?
I'm not ashamed of the part I play.
Oh, come on now, Henry Fonda. That's nothing to be remembered for, only he doesn't want to change. Then comes out and asks Inger Stevens who it was that he reminded her of, which she tells him.
He was a wagon scout.
A former lover who was killed during the same Indian raid that crippled her grandfather.
And you've buried yourself in this town ever since.
He then tries to compare her not getting over that shit to his criminal ways.
You're living further in the past than I am.
Oh, it's way different. You chose to be a criminal, so she leaves. So cut to that night, where bad things start to happen. Now that Gary Lockwood, James Best in the gang, are totally wasted. Great. We know what they're like when they're sober. A little slow Joe is more right than he'll ever know. The shit is about to hit the fan. On the streets of Fire Creek, as Gary Lockwood and James Best play drunken bullfighting, where James Best charges his way right out this front window and into the street, getting everyone's attention. Hey, it's me in my 20s. So Jimmy Stewart goes over to the cantina to investigate all the noise, where they're kind enough to pay that cantina owner for the busted window.
$5 take care of that window?
And even convince Jimmy Stewart to have a drink with them.
Oh, no, I appreciate the toast, naturally.
Only they abuse him and even make fun of the sheriff's badge that his son's made for him.
Look how that's spelled.
Well, schooling hadn't gone very far, time they made it.
I'm surprised these idiots know how to spell sheriff correctly. So Jimmy Stewart requests a little peace and quiet, and then leaves. So, with him gone now, they all start trying to decide who's gonna go over to that Indian woman's house and rape the shit out of her.
She got away making a man ache.
Just as Sheriff Jimmy Stewart puts his sons to bed, over at this loft house that they're staying at, where he tells them the story of Slow Little Joe, whose name is actually Arthur FIRECREEK, since he's so slow he doesn't even remember his actual last name.
How can anybody forget their last name?
So Fire Creek it is.
Arthur FIRECREEK.
Then cut to later that night, when a loud noise over at the Indian woman's place causes Arthur FIRECREEK to go over and investigate. That's where he discovers James Best raping the shit out of her. Starting to understand now why Dulcie hates men.
I've yet to find one that's worth a woman's patience.
Well, men like this anyway. He then spots Slow Little Joe catching him in the act and gives him the business for it. Tosses him right out into the streets and tells him to get lost so he can go finish his rape.
Stable boy.
Slow Little Joe tries to stop him, only to get his ass kicked. He then takes James Best's gun right out of his holster and demands that he stop this shit right now. Only, never having fired a gun before, doesn't realize how sensitive that trigger is and
Don't take but a hair on that trigger.
You can stand right there.
accidentally shoots James Best in the back. Dead. Well, good riddance. He was a rapist who was about to go finish a rape in progress. So I don't feel bad at all. However, this gunshot does get everyone in town to come out into the streets and see what the hell happened now. His drunk buddies demand justice be done about this, of course.
Now, how do you not mean to shoot a man in the back? With his own gun, huh?
As Slow Little Joe tries to explain himself,
But he never shot a gun before, Johnny.
the Indian woman even backs up his story.
He forced his way into my bedroom.
Sheriff Jimmy Stewart wants to do this proper and get some judge to come down and figure out what the hell to do.
Well, this is something for the Sweetwater judge.
A judge?
Only all they want to do is hang Slow Little Joe for this.
Mister, where I come from, this calls for rope.
So Sheriff Jimmy Stewart just arrests him and throws him into local jail. Henry Fonda then gives his men shit for this.
You couldn't do some quiet drinking and get some sleep.
Only they're dead set on seeing justice served.
Now, Drew's dying needs taken care of.
For the death of James Rapist Best. So back in jail, Jimmy Stewart is at a loss, and not sure what the hell he's even supposed to do now.
I don't even know whether I have the right to put you in this jail, let alone go out and arrest somebody else.
When Gary Lockwood and the gang decide to wake up the whole town.
Man, saved by the Drew!
For the last rites of Jeff Myrtlebank. That's right, the wake and funeral of James Best, which they forcibly drag everyone in town out of bed for, whether they like it the hell or not. Sheriff Jimmy Stewart then demands some answers.
What's going on?
From Henry Fonda, who claims this is just how they bury their dead.
Just an old-fashioned wake.
Have some respect, Sheriff Jimmy Stewart.
Should have no objection to how we bury our own.
So they perch James Best dead ass up in a chair and all start drunkenly dancing around him, as all the town folks are forced to sit and watch this madness. They even force this old guy to play the violin. So cut to Sheriff Jimmy Stewart, now over at the general store, where he watches all this shit go down with Old Man Jagger. That's where we get a little motivational speech from Old Man Jagger. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie, because it leads to Jimmy Stewart's even better motivational speech later on.
But I don't think anything's happening with you getting hurt over.
And is the core of this movie, in my opinion, of course. Sheriff Jimmy Stewart thinks he really ought to do something, only Old Man Jagger's like, why bother?
In the morning, they'll be gone. Everything creeping along the way it was before.
All the people of FIRECREEK do every day is protect their own little worlds.
Everybody protecting his own little world.
I love how he points out that these people can't handle any kind of change. Every day has to be the same. All they do here is maintain their simple lives.
They're frightened because something new and strange in town.
And now they're shocked that today ended differently than every other day normally ends. I love it.
Disturbed because the day didn't turn out like yesterday.
He's really dumping on these people. But don't worry, by tomorrow they'll be gone and everything will be back to normal, like nothing even happened. Back to your mundane lives. He does make an interesting point. Like their lives were a damn sitcom or something. He's not totally wrong. You grow or you die. He himself is just hopeless.
Let it go, Johnny.
As Sheriff Jimmy Stewart's quick to point out,
we've got more than that here, Mr. Whittier.
Thinking that he lives in a town of frightened losers, which he sort of does.
We've got to have more than that.
Cause yeah, even though he's all bleak about it, does make a lot of good points about these people. How people come to a town like this to avoid any kind of competition or conflict. How even he was once a lawyer in the big city.
I once practiced law.
Only couldn't take it anymore, so came out here, where nothing he said would ever matter.
I could live out each day here without my word having any importance.
He really has lost all hope, this guy. And even admits he's no better.
I'm no different from all the rest of them.
And really thinks that Sheriff Jimmy Stewart should just ignore all this. Just let it go. This old guy then rides up all of a sudden and Jimmy Stewart is forced to leave FIRECREEK and go home. Since his wife's labor has taken a turn for the worse apparently. And things are not going very well back on the Jimmy Stewart farm with Dulcie. So he hops in the wagon and leaves FIRECREEK to go be with his wife, leaving Henry Fonda and his gang of drunk losers to decide on their own what they're going to do about this whole situation before they leave in the morning.
Looks like it's going to be a busy night. Got some unfinished business.
Boy, is Gary Lockwood dead set on avenging the death of someone he tried to drown just this morning for slapping a wet towel in his face. So cut to later over at the boarding house, where Henry Fonda tries to get some advice from Inger Stevens about what the hell he's going to do now. He even compares himself to Sheriff Jimmy Stewart. He has a whole town expecting him to do something about this shit. And he has this gang of losers who expect him to do something about James Best getting what he deserved.
Town sheriff and me, quite a bit alike. Both riding a grease pig. Now to hold on.
I still feel more for Jimmy Stewart here though, as Henry Fonda tries to explain why he keeps living his life this way.
Maybe I don't have your temperament to accept another empty day.
Cause he needs every day to be exciting. Or he feels like he's failed at life, I guess. Failed at being somebody. So he actually gets Inger Stevens to kiss him, and then takes comfort in her bosom. Aw. Then cut to the Jimmy Stewart farm, as Jimmy Stewart gets home only to discover that the labor was false.
It's a false labor.
But his wife's alright, mostly. In her days, she goes on about the good old days. In their youth, back on the wagon train. when they had big dreams only to end up settling for FIRECREEK.
Why did we settle for less than we wanted?
He then has Dulcie watch after his wife, since he really does need to get back to FIRECREEK now, before all hell breaks loose.
Well, there's obviously nothing holding you here.
So Dulcie assures him that his wife will be fine,
Her worst time was last night. She'll do all right now.
and he heads back to FIRECREEK. So cut to the next morning as Sheriff Jimmy Stewart gets into FIRECREEK and can immediately tell that something's not right. The streets are completely barren of people, and it's windy as hell, meaning a shootout's probably about to happen. So he rides over to the stable, walks on over, then goes inside the stable, only to make a startling discovery. Those assholes hung slow little Joe last night for justice, for accidentally killing a guy, for raping a woman. These guys are just awful. How can you hang a guy like this and not feel anything? James' best character was a piece of shit. Fuck him. I'm surprised they didn't kill the shaggy DA too. He is the mayor after all, and no one even tried to stop them from doing it. They broke him out of jail, tried him, and hung him. And this enrages Jimmy Stewart. He then storms out into the street and starts yelling at all the gutless townsfolk, still hiding inside their homes, even while all that shit happened.
How could you let it happen?
And if there's one thing I love, it's an enraged Jimmy Stewart. Normally always so calm and soft-spoken.
You were all here.
Until you pull something like this and force him to go Jimmy Stewart crazy.
How could you let it happen?
Which can be a bit terrifying, I must say. He has that murderous look in his eyes that says he means business now, baby. That's when Henry Fonda appears with his gang of shitheads.
They had no choice.
Cause they're still here.
We didn't bother running.
Why leave, they thought, when they pretty much run the town now?
Where you find no law, you set your own.
You might as well name it after James' best character at this point. Rapist Creek. That's when they informed Sheriff Jimmy Stewart that they tried Slow Little Joe, found him guilty, and hung his ass.
We tried him, found him guilty.
So just deal with it. But don't worry, they're leaving now. Jimmy Stewart then starts to throw threats at Henry Fonda about following him and making damn sure that the law catches up with him. And that they all hang for this.
But I'm following. We get to a marshal. I'm gonna charge you with murder, and I'm gonna watch all four of you hang.
So, bang! Henry Fonda shoots him in the leg, just to slow him down and give him a head start.
Little worrying over that leg will slow you down.
Which Gary Lockwood gladly pays for.
Ain't nothing $5 won't take care of in this town.
It's his running gag, folks. So Sheriff Jimmy Stewart hobbles over to the general store and demands Old Man Jagger's handgun.
Come on, I want that gun.
Give it to him.
No, he's crazy. He's gonna get himself killed.
I know, it's worth it. So he can take on Henry Fonda and his gang of fucking losers, all by himself.
That boy Arthur's dead because I didn't take a stand with him in the beginning.
Way to go, Sheriff Jimmy Stewart. As Old Man Jagger begs Jimmy Stewart not to do this.
I'm not watching you get yourself killed by those men.
It's not your fight, only nope. It is now, Old Man Jagger. It's yours too, dipshit. Go listen to your radio, you puss. And that's when we get the climax and whole point of the film. Jimmy Stewart's epic motivational speech. To knock Old Man Jagger's more hopeless motivational speech, bam, right out of the water. In my opinion, of course. It's just great. He goes on about how you need to stand up to garbage people, like Henry Fonda and his men, even if it kills you.
Yeah.
He then calls Old Man Jagger on calling FIRECREEK a town of losers.
You say this is a town of losers.
And defends poor dead Arthur FIRECREEK.
Well, how could you say Arthur is a loser? He fought back and didn't have anything to fight back with.
Slow Little Joe, of all people. The dopiest one of all. And the only one who had the balls to do something about it. Only to be killed for it. Then he admits that if anyone is a loser, it's him, Sheriff Jimmy Stewart.
The day I crossed this valley, you had the biggest loser of all time settling right here.
Since now, after all this shit, he sees that he only settled in FIRECREEK.
And all I saw here was land that nobody wanted, and ground that nobody would be challenging me for.
Because he too knew that there would be no one fighting him for it. No competition, no conflict. A place that he could call home that he wouldn't have to have a land war for.
I saw too many people die fighting over land. Well, this wasn't gonna happen to me, not to Johnny Cobb.
Like most of the people here, they were afraid to keep on fighting for what they truly wanted and settled for less. They settled for FIRECREEK. Hell, a lot of us would. And Jimmy Stewart really puts his all into this speech too. I gotta give him credit here.
Search for a place where there are no bruises and tie it up with a ribbon.
It's some of his best acting, in my opinion, of course.
And tell yourself that what's inside is the sum total of your life.
He's pure Jimmy Stewart method acting here. I love it. And ends it with this perfect quote to tie his whole point together.
What I didn't see was the day a man decides not to face the world is the day he'd better step out of it.
And then demands that damn gun.
Now give me the gun!
I would give it to him.
Now give me the gun!
You convinced me, Stewart. Only it takes him finally explaining his connection to that Indian girl and her white baby. And the answer to that whole fiasco...
That child belonged to my dead brother.
His dead brother was the father of that baby. And was killed, I guess, for creating a half-breed or something like that.
When the death of a half-breed was a cause.
And he didn't take a stand then either. So now Old Man Jagger is convinced and gives Jimmy Stewart that pistol.
Bottom shelf, Johnny.
That he oh so kindly demanded.
Now give me the gun!
And now he's finally all hyped up to take a stand against dicks like this.
Once people take a stand, there won't be any place for the Larkins to hide.
Yeah! Go get him, Jimmy Stewart! This just turned into the man who shot Liberty Valance. So Jimmy Stewart comes charging out into the streets, gun a-blazing. No joke. He just opens fire on these guys. Morgan Woodward is shot, his horse is spooked, and he's dragged away screaming. Morgan Woodward was last seen crossing the Mexican border. Well, that's one down and everyone takes cover. Don't worry, everybody, I'm sure he'll be on Gunsmoke next week. It's 1968, we still got 7 seasons of that to go. So, thinking he's behind these crates, they all charge Jimmy Stewart. And fire away. Only he's gone, slipped out the back. Henry Fonda tries to make a deal, only he gets no answer from Stewart.
We leave, you go for a marshal.
Too late for that shit, Fonda. So he sends Jack Elam to the stable, with orders to set it ablaze along with the whole town unless Jimmy Stewart agrees.
This whole town goes up like a prairie fire.
So cut to the stable, where Jack Elam goes to light that fire. Only is stopped by Sheriff Jimmy Stewart, where a fight quickly ensues. Only to be pitchforked by Jimmy Stewart first. Thoink! Ha! Take that, you sack of shit. 2 points Stewart now. Henry Fonda tries to get Gary Lockwood to stay back and be smart.
You know better to go to a man who's expecting you.
Only he defies him and goes all gung-ho and charges the stable to go after Sheriff Jimmy Stewart, all by himself. Mr. Confident here. He's about to close in on Stewart too at one point when his kids yell to him, distracting Gary Lockwood just long enough for him to roll over and shoot him dead. Pow, 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 pow. Take that shit, you asshole. Jimmy Stewart is kicking ass. And Henry Fonda's all that's left now, as he marches onto the streets of FIRECREEK, all epic-like. Calling for Henry Fonda to come out and face him, even though he's got a wounded leg. That's when Henry Fonda jumps out and shoots him in the shoulder. Pow! Still trying to make a deal with Sheriff Jimmy Stewart that allows him to just ride out of here.
I said it's all over. Drop it and you'll live. I'll ride out.
Only Sheriff Jimmy Stewart's not having it. He's all in at this point, ready to die for the cause.
$2 a month, the homemade badge.
And nearly does, only to be saved, pow, by Inger Stevens, who shoots Henry Fonda dead from the boarding house window. Even though she looks like she really didn't want to. She sort of felt for Henry Fonda in the end, but couldn't just let him kill Jimmy Stewart, who's now a fucking legend forever. He won, and now FIRECREEK is a little bit less of a town of losers. So look out, Sweetwater, because FIRECREEK is a city on the grow. The end. That was FIRECREEK. What'd you think, Crispin?
Awesome!
Good. An underrated little western with an excellent cast. Which brings me into my final thoughts on this film that I really appreciate. Without that Jimmy Stewart speech, and that all-around lesson of fighting for what you believe, and not being pushed around and walked on by people,
No harm done, Mr. Cobb.
would make this a pretty generic Western. So in my opinion, it's the writing and the acting that went out in this one. Jimmy Stewart was great. Dean Jagger too. You needed his less motivational speech to lead to Jimmy Stewart's.
Everything creeping along the way it was before.
It really was a good collection of character actors in Fire Creek, who I've all seen and know from many other things. And finally the director again, Vincent Micavetti, who like I said, directed Ask Max, and a lot of other TV, like 6 original Star Treks, 45 episodes of Gunsmoke, and all the 90s Columbo TV movies. And much, much, much more of course. So yeah, Fire Creek is a memorable little Western that I highly recommend. For its message, pretty much the same message from The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, but nonetheless, a good movie. In my opinion, of course. And with that, I'll end my look at Fire Creek. Big thanks as usual to all my subscribers and leavers of comments. Come on, Crispin. You really need that gun?
Yeah,
Fine.
I need it. Makes me feel special. Makes me feel like a man.
Well, you're not a man, you're a Crispin.
Gotta start somewhere.
Alright, Crispin. Adios, folks.